My name is Bill Green. I was born on our home place near the Elkhorn Tavern in Garfield, Arkansas in 1938. Well, my dad was Bart Green. My mother was Gladys Green, well, Gladys Brome, her maiden name. And she was raised on a farm at the bottom that joined our property at the bottom of our hill that went up to our house. And they got married in 1928, I think, and had 9 kids, and I'm one of them.
Well, tell me about your parents. First, your dad. What was he like?
Personality-wise, you mean? Or oh, he was pretty easygoing. He never drank. He did smoke a lot, rolled his own, and he lived to be 103 years old and ate everything we think is wrong right now. And my mother was, if there's a better person in this world, I would. She had the patience, as she said, of Job, and she just raised us. And there was not a lot of emotion in our family, but we had no doubt about how much we were loved.
So tell me, what was it like growing up back in those days in such a big family around here? What was it like day to day?
Well, it was work mostly. We had chores to do. Of course, we had cattle, and my dad raised a lot of hogs. We sometimes would have as many as 200 for sale, and milk cows. And my brother and I, after we were probably 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old, we hit the ground at 5 o'clock in the morning, went to milk cows, and come in, eat breakfast, and met the school bus at about 7:15 in the morning. And we did that for years and years and years until we got out of school. Yes, by hand. We milked by hand. And the girls did housework, and we were always building fence, repairing fence, even clearing new ground. My dad raised strawberries, and his dad had 30 acres of apples, and he shipped those apples out of Garfield by boxcar, as did the other farmers around here. And they shipped them. I have a letter from a broker in Oregon, wrote to my dad's dad, saying that enclosed was money, that you were right about the weight or something of that. And that is very unusual, and it wouldn't happen now. But he was a good businessman. He at one time he was fairly wealthy, and considering what was wealthy at that time. And I have a letter from a guy who was going to open a bank in Garfield, and the letter said that his assets were $10,000, and would my dad's dad be interested in opening an account there. I don't know if he did or if he didn't, but $10,000 is not a lot of money now, but I guess it was in the 1800s. We went to school, my wife and I both went to school at Garfield when it was 9 grades. First 2 years I went was at Corinth, which is a little school about 2.5 miles from where we live, and we walked it uphill both ways. And we walked that every day. And then when the consolidation came along, we consolidated. We had the choice of going, my dad and mother had the choice of sending us to Pea Ridge or Garfield, and they thought that Garfield would be better, so that's where we went. And it was Garfield was through 9 grades then. And that is, I guess that's probably the happiest time of my life. I really enjoyed, because I still know a lot of, not everybody's died off. I still am friends with people I went to grade school with and on through high school.
So what did you learn in that small country school? Tell me about it. What was it like going to the school?
Well, you had reading, writing, and arithmetic, and geography, and history, and of course, 9th grade you had algebra and math. All the grades you had English and math, and our teacher in the 5th and 6th grade was a guy named Mr. Wirt, and he, as the saying goes, killed his own snakes. He never, when you did something wrong, he gave you a whipping himself. He didn't send you to the principal or anything. So he was, but you wouldn't have thought we would have learned much from a guy like that, but we surely did. The girl I went through school with there at Garfield, she was valedictorian at Rogers when we graduated. So we learned quite a bit at Garfield.
Tell me more about your family. You've got some information there about your ancestry that's in a book. Can you talk about that book and then tell me what it says?
Yeah, it goes back as far as my great-granddad. Meekley Henry Green was his name, and they came here from Kentucky down through. They were in Missouri for a short time, and then came on down. I don't know why they came. Left Missouri and came here, but my own thoughts is there was a lot of trouble between Kansas and Missouri, free state and slave state. You know, the outlawing, burning one another's barns and killing one another. But I just think they just left there, my own opinion, I don't know that, but to get away from that and came on down here and just settled there we were 3/4 of a mile from the Elkhorn Tavern. Our property bordered the Scott farm, and they were, my brother, my grandmother, and Aunt Frances, we called her. She was the daughter of the people who owned the Elkhorn Tavern when the battle was fought. And she and my grandmother were really good friends. And my dad would go the Elkhorn Hill. After it rained, he would go up through there and pick up quite a few mini balls and grape shot and pieces of cannonball. I still got some of those.
So for people who might not know, what was the tavern and why is it significant?
The Elkhorn Tavern was a stage stop to begin with, and on the what was the name of the Butterfield stage line, and it was on that road that comes down by our house was the Trail of Tears and the Telegraph Road, and back in the 1800s, my dad's dad had a telephone, and so because of the telegraph line that went down that road, and the old Crank and Pete's talking. You know, he had one and talked to, like you saw Andy Griffith, I suppose, on TV. That was, it's hung on our wall for years and years. I don't know whatever happened to it, but anyway, I know my dad said that Jesse James was his granddad's. His granddad really liked Jesse James because he robbed banks and railroads, I guess. And nobody liked banks and railroads at that time. And anyway, my dad's granddad first married first and had one child, and she died. And we don't know who. His name was Cale, but we have no idea whatever happened to him. And then he married a 3/4 blood Cherokee woman. and they had 7 kids. I guess it was my dad, one of those. And well, farmed. My dad farmed all of his life, and he worked briefly at that cannery in Pea Ridge for not very long, anyway. But his biggest worries were either too much rain or not enough rain. Otherwise, and that's why I think that's why he lived to be 103. The stress is probably the biggest enemy we have, and he was really active up until probably 6 months before he died. Now my wife and I didn't live here when he was I just retired when he passed away. Well, I graduated from Rogers one night and left for California the next morning, and went to work for my uncle in San Jose, and I worked there all summer, and I had football scholarships, but I busted my shoulder up pretty bad, so when it came, I was going to Ouachita Baptist on a football scholarship, but then when they sent me the papers for my family doctor to fill out to say that he wouldn't do it, because he said if I broke my shoulder again, I'd be going around like this, and he wasn't going to be a part of it. So that took care of my college. So, but the next spring, I did start to college, and I didn't graduate, and I was offered a job to manage a feed mill in Rogers. And I did for, not very long, till Ralston Purina offered me another job, and I took it, and it just went. I never asked for a job. I was offered one, and I went from Purina to George's for 6 or 7 years. And then I went to work for Swift and Company, and I worked there we were in Arkansas and Texas with Swift, and then there in Texas for 2.5 years, and they in their wisdom they got a new president, and he wanted to divest himself of a lot of the plants, and we were one of them. So I was offered a job by a company in California, and I took it, and we were there 11.5 years. And then Cargill called me, and there was a lot of, before we left, there was a lot of racial problems. They were burning down stores in towns, and we lived pretty close to a big town, Fresno. And I told my wife, if somebody offers me a job, I think it's time to leave California. And it wasn't 2 weeks until I got a call from Cargill, and we met with them and with the North American manager in Memphis Airport, and they wanted me to come to Florida, and I did. And from there to Honduras, we lived in Honduras, and then from there to England. And then after I retired when we were in England, and we came back, and Cargill wanted me to travel to Southeast Asia, Vietnam, and Thailand, and Central America. And I did that for probably 3 or 4 years, and consulted a year for Tyson. And I just got tired of being gone 5,000 miles away from home, and decided to just quit all that. So when we lived in California, we had bought a 300-acre farm just outside of Powell, Missouri, just the other side of Pea Ridge, and that's where I retired to. And then we lived there for several years, and then we sold it and moved to Bella Vista, where we are now. when we left England, we didn't really have any place to live except the farm that we had bought. And we never intended to live there, but we did. And because we didn't have any, we sold, of course, our houses, or Cargill had bought our houses in Florida and Georgia, and that's just where we wound up. When I graduated from high school at Rogers, it was 5,200 people. The only business actually was went Sonas, and then it was a farm community. On Saturday, you could hardly walk on the streets. They were so full of people because all the farmers came in on Saturday to buy groceries for the week, and and especially when school was starting back, to buy school clothes for kids. And it was just a real good time to live. And we really enjoyed our childhood. They come in, and the men would gather and talk, and women would shop and whatever, and the kids would go to the show. That was it. It was the only time we ever went anywhere, was on Saturday. Any place to go was a big event.
So when you were a kid running around in Garfield, I guess kind of doing whatever you wanted to, what would you and your friends do for fun?
Well, at school, believe it or not, we would go. There was a cane patch down in the holler from Garfield School, and we go down there and cut those and sharpen them on the end, and believe it or not, throw them at one another. I don't think they would. And we had marbles. We played marbles a lot, and everybody in the spring had a pocket full of chinky pins, and you know what they are. And hulls all over the place, eating them, and just nonsense that boys do.
What would y'all do as young boys to make money? Or did you just work for your dad?
We just worked at home, yeah. Yeah, we didn't know what money was. I know a fellow I went all the way through school with that moved to Kansas City, he said he didn't realize how some of the houses, how nice they were up there, because he'd never seen them. Rogers didn't have any mansions or anything, and he had never seen, because I hadn't either.
What else about the changes do you remember?
Well, mostly after we were gone for so long. We were gone from here 20 years, and it was in the 90s when we would come back, 80s and 90s. It was hard to remember how to get around. It had grown nothing like it is now. But I remember one time we were back here, I got lost in Bentonville, and I tried a heck of a time figuring out how to get back to the farm. And it just altogether different. Roads were different.
What about now?
Well, I don't even like to go to town now. It's I can't find my way around unless I know where I'm going. And it's because I think Rogers is now about 70,000 people, and from 5,200, it's a lot of folks.
What about the changes out in the Garfield area?
Well, when I was growing up, we knew everybody and everybody knew us. We were related to half of the people in the Garfield area. And now we don't know hardly anybody. It's just, except ones that we have the Garfield Reunion Committee with, that's about who we know now in Garfield.
Talk about the Pea Ridge Battlefield Park.
My mother had a clipping on it, I still got it, out of the paper. They bought over 4,000 acres for under $400,000 for the park. And rumor had it that actually the state bought the land, and they just sent somebody out to appraise it and house, and none of the houses were really, I mean, they're just old farmhouses, and but house and barn and everything. For instance, my wife place on Indian Creek, her dad had 280 acres on Indian Creek, and well, 80 was hillside, but 200 bottomland, $9,300. And they told him, they told people when they did, this is what we get. If you don't take it, we'll put it in escrow and condemn, and you can take us to court if you want to. And that's, so you really didn't have a lot of choice. And with the lake going in and the park going in at the same time, when they went to buy another farm, it was just, I mean, property had gone up, and they were now my folks' place, they couldn't take it. The park couldn't, because my grandmother was still alive and she had a lifetime dowry, and they couldn't take our farm. So we just took 150 acres out of the park. It was bordered us on three sides. And I mean, they lived there during the battle. And I don't know what it would have been like, but I heard stories about the bushwhackers after the war was on, while the war was going on, coming through, taking horses, mules, cattle, and robbing people. And somebody said they had known of a guy, a farmer around somewhere where we lived, that had sold some stock or something, and had some money, and they stuck his feet inside the stove and burned him to get him to tell where it was. Never knew whether he told them or whether he didn't, but that's just what handed down from one generation to the next. But there was a lot of things went on that wasn't very pleasant after the war.
Like what?
Like that, after the war. And I guess that's a matter of history.
So
Now, Wallace Scott, who was the son of Aunt Frances, her folks lived at that tavern during this, when the battle was fought, he did take them to court. And they offered him $11,000. He had 80 acres of flat land. He had a good farm, and there joined the tavern. And he took him to court at Bentonville, and I went to that. I was in high school, I think, and I went to that here, and the judge admonished, got on to him for he was holding up progress, and gave him less than what they had offered him. People, eminent domain. If they want it, they can take it. And some of that's good, and some of it's not so good.
do you know what about the people that lost their land from the lake expansion?
Well, my wife's folks was one of them.
Tell me about it.
Well, most of them had lived there all of their life, and their parents before them. And when they had to move, they were old, and they didn't know what to do. And a lot of them just passed away shortly after they had to move, and just lost, I guess. You can understand that. We used to, when we were boys up to the 9th grade anyway, we would spend the night with one another. And when I think about that, when you spent the night with someone else on the farm, you did the same thing you did if you were home. You milk cows, the chores, and that was it. And nobody, we were, as Stanley Williams put it, we were rich. We just didn't have any money.
So what do you mean by that? You were rich, but you didn't have any money.
Rich
in
in
what?
in the life we lived, I guess, is what I would say. And that there were no divorces. There were just. I never heard my parents argue, ever. They probably did sometimes, but I never heard it. And it was just a happy time. Well, I'd tell them about what I told you, I guess, that it was just a good place to live and grow up at that time. There was no crime, no crime. I mean, and a lot of the things now, but probably before my time. But if somebody did something wrong, such as child molestation, the neighbors took care of him. They didn't go to the law. They killed their own snakes, and that was probably good, in my mind, anyway.